אמור לראות. אמור לראות.
No, fuck it, בוא נדבר בעברית, מה יש פה דובר? אוקיי. fuck it is not in but it's okay, we'll start like, I can deal with it. I can sing, I can do a lot of things, I can tell some jokes, you know, and don't let Misko tell you dead jokes. You have dead jokes, which, you know, we recorded the course today together about Qwik. And every time we did a fail, like either me or him did a joke that didn't go well, I pushed a button and you saw a fail video live and got a reaction. It was cool. Anyway, you will see. Okay, we can start. Okay. So I need to practice my English. Okay, so it's gonna be kind of Hebrewish today. Okay, it's like the husband of the house gone crazy and all that stuff. Okay, so let it sink. Okay, so welcome to another event of JavaScript Israel. This time in a live performance. I need to not block the screen. Okay, it was ages since we did an in-person event and also with like the full slides, like way back. Who is here from like, you know, from the beginning of JavaScript Israel in the room? Okay, wow, nice, like the old schoolers, old timers, okay? So you remember the old slides, so we're taking it vintage style and we do the thing. So we start, we have a full package today and we have a surprise. I will talk about in the end of the meetup. It wasn't planned, but Michelle actually, you know, got here for a business trip. And we will do like a panel in the end about performance with Misko and Michelle and Benji and like, you know, all the performance experts and such, and we'll ask them stuff about their life, not about performance even, okay? So that's a surprise in the end. Okay, so great, let's begin. JavaScript Israel, first of all, let's do a warm-up, okay? Remember from before. So first of all, talk to the person next to you, tell them your name and where do we work for, and two sides, both sides tell, hello, I'm X, and I'm from Y. Okay. Wow. Okay, great. Nice. Okay. Cool. That's it. Shut up. Okay. No, really, seriously? Okay. Okay, awesome. That's the point of having a real-life meetup. We can talk with each other and over each other and all that stuff, right? Okay, awesome. Now that we know each other, okay, let's do a fun thing together, okay, real quick, and then we start because we have a lot of digging to do. So I want to practice here because, you know, we have a esteemed guest today, so we want to, you know, give them a big round of applause and even laugh. Sometimes when they do a dead joke, you know, we want to laugh, okay? So we'll do the warm-up with the claps and the laughs, okay? This hand will be clapping, so this will start like slow, and this will be like super rock concert, you know, throwing bras, okay? Eliran will throw on me, okay? And this hand will be laughing like ha ha ha, polite, and really like losing it, okay? Cool, so let's start with the clapping, okay? Very small, and oh my God. Oh, wow. Nice, delay there. Okay, and this will be the, okay. Dead joke, dead joke, dead joke. Okay, let's try it together. Okay, cool, good job, good job, good job. Okay, awesome. I want to try something else, but I think we're warmed up. We might try it in the middle. Okay, awesome. Cool. Where? Oh, Melio. Okay, so thanks to our sponsors, Melio. Okay, they're who host us and and sponsored this group even when we were virtual and doing cool stuff, great technology company. And I think they're hiring, and we'll hear from Yotam soon. Also Pecan and Hi-Res. You remember? Yeah, it's not a coincidence. We started sponsoring, okay? Well, I will talk about it later. Okay. Okay, I'm Shai Reznik, and thank you. I want to say thanks for, first of all, again, our host, okay, for hosting, not just sponsoring, and also our speakers, Yotam Bloom, Misko Hevery, Benjamin Greenbaum, and Michelle Vestrate will join our panel, okay? Super thanks for investing the time. Our purpose is to be helpful and be a kind JavaScript community, to connect great minds together. So we try to bring you like the best minds and to create like cool events for you, and use our JavaScript powers for good. If you don't know, in the start of the Corona, okay, we huddle like the best minds in our, like 5 of the best minds in our group, and we actually secretly worked on the app that connects all the dots of the Sharsheret Hadbaka. And and some of the people who worked on it, Gil and Bnaya and Uri. Uri is not here, right? No, but Bnaya is here, worked on it, and so yeah. So we do good things outside, and we want to connect other communities to our community, and use our JavaScript powers for good. So take this and bring as many people to our community and welcome them. And also we have a code of conduct, so okay, don't do stuff, אל תעשו לחברכם מה ששנוא עליכם, okay? Don't do stuff to others what they hate on you, okay? That's okay. Now, a few community heroes. This is the old school slide that you used to do. The first one was Benji, who will speak today, was on the first. But don't clap for Benji, he's already a speaker. It was the first time we ever did it. Benji was the first, I think, one of the first names on this where we didn't know each other. This is how we got to know each other. I put his name, and this is how we joined the community. So a few honorable mention of our community on Facebook that keeps helping. Yanai Edri, who runs the Negev community. Every week, okay, I found out recently, every week he does the JavaScript weekly and all that stuff. He does it by hand, like, and wanted to be here and couldn't. So Tali Barak, okay, also, who helps a lot and answering in comments and such. And Elad Cohen, who also shares like cool stuff with us. And welcome you all to participate in the Facebook group. So thank you, and you will be on the slides in the future. Okay, awesome. Come and speak. We have JSL, CFP. We welcome all of the newcomers, first-time speakers. We help you have speaker buddies, and we want to get as many people joining and sharing knowledge. So don't be afraid. This is a really easy ride, and we'll give you like a lightning talk, like I'm going to do, which is another surprise. Okay, and we're always looking for more sponsors to create more events and to make bigger things. We're planning on like doing more picnics and maybe like a conference, maybe, I'm not sure. Okay, but we'll see. And mute your phones, okay? And that's about it. We have the raffle, okay? In the end, we'll raffle, as always, WebStore and Quokka. So this is the link to join. You cannot join afterwards, just now. And you submit your lecture. Okay, awesome. So we have the slides ready for the next part. Now, the surprise is we looked for a lecture about core web vitals, okay? Because this is super important for today's topic, which is performance. Now, we couldn't find, we sent the CFP, nobody submitted. We wanted like people who never spoke before on stage. And we couldn't find, like they didn't submit. So last moment, I prepared, and I never gave a talk. So this will be my first talk, okay? No, it's a lie. Everybody knows it's a lie. But I just did it ad hoc because I think it's super important to set the base of why this is important, why this topic is important, and where things are heading. So, okay, now starts for Gidi now starts my lecture, okay, to cut it here. Cut, okay, yay, lecture. Welcome, Shai Reznik, to the stage. Hello, everyone. I'm Shai Reznik. Okay. Yeah, I will give you a lecture. What the hell is this, Alon? What? How did you make? No, it's magic, dude. How? It's double magic. And they meet each other and they make a baby. Okay. So, I don't know. But we'll, okay. Code of conduct. Okay. So, core web vitals. For dummies like me, okay? This will be a super short lecture just to set the stage for next, okay? Okay, I'm Shai Reznik, just for the YouTubes afterwards. I'm a Google developer expert. I run Hi-Res.io, the best JavaScript consulting company and training company in all of Israel. And we have the best courses in the world. Okay, and I founded this group, okay? You probably know that. So let's get on with this mouse. What the hell? Okay. Some of you think that it's on purpose. It's not on purpose, okay? Yeah. So first of all, why should we care? Why should we care as the business, first of all, okay? So Core Web Vitals are the Google metrics for performance for website, and they actually are tied to the SEO ranking. So if Company A and Company B both have the same super cool content SEO company and agency, they compete on this, on the Core Web Vitals. So whichever is faster and produce like better user experience wins. Now, customer happiness is the second thing, okay? We don't want like, angry customers because it hurts our brand or branding. So that's another reason. And also want it for better conversions because there are multiple studies that shows that these ties, like the Core Web Vitals, and that's the study that Google showed. And also every 100 millisecond more, impacts like large e-commerce websites by millions of dollars. So that's also important. Now, why should we care as developers? Okay, and that's more important because I think most of us, some of us work on e-commerce or like client-facing web apps and such, but some of us work on B2B and all that stuff. So the way I see it, if we look into the future, in the future, the way I read the current state of things and where things are going, there will be like the age of instant web apps. This is the term, because we have lots of term, progressive, hydration, multiple, all that stuff, and I just like to simplify things, so I just call it instant web apps. Web apps that loads instantly and operates instantly. Okay, that's the way everybody is going. If you see all the server-side rendering stuff that's happening, like Next and Remix, and all the goals are converging into one place. So it's great to, and Core Web Vitals and all the metrics are driving this trend. So that's why I think it's super important to stay relevant and to look ahead and see what's coming is to learn this topic. And we also see like actual studies by Google that companies keep like increasing these metrics by 20% each year. So it also contributes to this trend. Now, but whenever you Google for Core Web Vitals, okay, this is what you see. And I don't know about you, but when I saw this in the first time, this is what I felt, okay? Like, what the hell is that, okay? Like, what does all these acronyms and all the things, I don't know what the hell is that. That's why I created, Core Web Vitals for dummies like me, because I cannot like deal with all these letters and stuff. So, so let's start. We have three core. We have Web Vitals, which is lots of metrics, but we have three that are the core Web Vitals. So the first one is LCP, or as I like to say, let's grab coffee, please, okay? That's the way I like to think, because it's about loading. The real name is largest contentful paint, which doesn't mean anything to anyone normal. But basically, it's like how much time it takes for the largest content area, which has images and text, to load, okay, until the first interaction of the user. This is what it says, and a good time for it is under 2.5 seconds, okay? Now, how can we improve it? We can, optimize our images and put them in better places and such. And we can also download less code, execute less JavaScript on load, and for that, we can use techniques like server-side rendering, and also use the new edge caching, like running the functions on the CDNs and stuff like that, like Cloudflare workers and all that stuff. But these are the optimizations. We can do other stuff as well. It's not a complete list. But these what contributes to the slow loading time. Now, that's the first metric. The second metric is FID, or for image sake, do something, okay? And for those of you who don't speak Hebrew, okay, for image is your mother, for your mother's sake, in your mother's sake, do something. And, or first input delay, okay? That means that, you know, when you click on something, how long it takes for the browser or like, you know, the engine to respond, even not like the actual response, but just to, you know, handle, like the handler start, you know, its process, how much time between the click or the event to the response it takes. And a good time for it is under 100 milliseconds. That's a second core web vital metric that Google is using. What are you, like washing dishes now? What are you doing? Okay, I'm in the middle, I'm trying to concentrate. Okay, so this is, okay, so this is feed, okay? This is how we remember for image sake, you know, do something, okay? So, okay, how can we improve? Download less files and execute less JavaScript, okay? If we download less, okay? Because of the main thread, right? It's like we have only a single thread in JavaScript, and if we do other stuff, we cannot respond to the click, right? Okay, now the last one, okay? CLS, what does it mean? Could you load still? Okay, it's like could you stand still, but load, okay? Why? Because it's cumulative layout shift. What do they need to make it complicated, okay? All it means that, you know, when you know, sometimes when you try to click on something or read something, and all of a sudden it pops down, right? It's like one time I read a news article in a shitty news website here in Israel. I won't mention their name so they won't get the publicity. But I was reading like an article super important like for me, okay? And I went to read it, and all of a sudden like they added like an ad or something like that, and I didn't even see the ad. It just like put all the content next, and I lost the page, and I started getting angry and started like telling the website, okay, I'm closing it. I'm closing the website. I'm moving to another website. But I really wanted to continue reading the. So I caught myself like doing Rikshi, making the website guilty. You know, it's not okay. So I read about Britney Spears. Anyway, so that's the It was important if he should get married again. Okay, so we don't want that. So Google measuring it, they have like a calculation of how many pixels we got like dropped and all that stuff down below. And this calculation, we won't get into it because this should be a lightning talk. But it needs to be under 0.1. How can we improve? Server-side rendering, of course, not like, you know, just showing everything because the browser is very smart at just showing HTML. Downloading less code and execute less JavaScript on load. Again, same stuff because, you know, it loads and okay. Now, can you spot the trend? Okay, downloading less JavaScript, executing less JavaScript on load. That's the future of the instant web apps. That's where everything is going. And that's why it's important to learn about these topics today. Thank you very much. Okay, this was the lightning talk. Okay. And now, we will move. Okay, I will do something. I will welcome Yotam Bloom, which will talk about from Elio, which will talk about 5 performance tips that we can do to start improving our stuff today, and then move to Misko's lecture and Benji's lecture. Where is Benji? Oh. Okay. Okay. So, what's up? That's okay. Everything's okay. Yeah. You have your presentation?
Okay.
The one with your wedding. The wedding photo.
So, okay, let me tell you a story. Benji, if you don't know Benji, you will know. When he heard that Misko is coming to Israel, like the minute I told him, he told me, "Oh, you're getting married." I was like, "What?" "Yeah, we're getting married to Misko." And I was like, yeah, you know, I wanted to flow with him, like לזרום איתו. So, okay. So I said yes. I said, oh, cool. When is the invitation and all that stuff? And so I like joke around. After 2 days, I had a presentation, you know, that they do in the weddings with like how you met and all that stuff. So he wanted to present it. Do you want to see the presentation of me and Misko afterwards? After the, you know, only live people after all this digging will see it. Okay. Okay, are you good? Yeah. Okay, so with a big round of applause, okay, let's welcome Yotam Bloom.
Yeah. I think it's okay.
Okay.
So hi everyone. I'll try to do a lightning talk. So here's 5 tips to improve your app's performance. So a little about me. I'm a tech lead here at Melio for the past 2 years. I'm married with 2 boys, full stack developer. I lost 24 kilos, 53 pounds, and I used to love to cook. Okay, so a little bit about Melio. So Melio is a B2B payments company. We exist over 4 years. It was founded to keep small business in business. Basically, what we do is we manage the cash flow for businesses, provide them with a way to pay with checks, ACH, credit, debit. We're currently over 100 developers here in Israel. We're over 500 worldwide with sites in Tel Aviv, and New York, and Denver. We're growing. We're a unicorn. We raised over $500 million, a valuation of $4 billion. And again, we're growing. It's a really, really great ride. It's a really, really great product, and really, really good people who are up there. So thank you. So before we start, if we want to talk about performance, we cannot think about it before we measure it, okay? So we have to measure everything. A good indication and a good place to start is the Google Page Speed Insights, which could give you a really correct score on what's the state of your app, and can give you also clues and indications on what you should do in order to improve it. Another very cool but really bad website is the web page test. If any of you have ever entered it, it's pretty bad, but it has a lot of insights, okay? So if you'll go through that first block, it's amazing. And of course, also in your Google Chrome developer tools, you can see the time of which function, how much long did it take to do the execution. Okay, so tip number 1, HTTP requests. So you need to monitor your app to find which requests are unnecessary to reduce requests. Okay, the browser has a 6 thread, I think, and all the API calls you do is blocking, meaning it's a limited resource. So you really, really need for that initial page load to really have a really defined set of API file requests that you're requesting. Switch to HTTP 2, okay, or even HTTP 3. HTTP 1, basically, you can see the image. You request a resource and you get it. You request a resource and you get it. HTTP 2 did a really big improvement. 70% of the websites in the world uses HTTP 2. Became pretty much standard. And basically what it does, it brings you all the data you need without the unnecessary handshake. HTTP 3, it's even more advanced, meaning the streams or data are being transferred as UDP and not TCP, meaning it's non-blocking, meaning it's a lot more faster. There's another block called Qwik on the back end of all this that basically reduce the handshake part of the HTTPS. Makes it very, very quick. And CDN, okay? You need to use it to get your asset faster. It makes sense, right? I don't have to do a lot of back and forth to get each file. It locates on a CDN, cached, and published in a node nearby me. Okay, images. We want to reduce the number of images for the initial page load because they are blocking our page load until we download all the resources. We want to choose the right file format for better performance. Okay, for example, PNG is a really, really big file, and we want to be cautious with it. JPEG can be loosely comparison, so you can use that to optimize your images. And GIFs. GIFs have 256 colors, meaning if you have some video that you want to show, it will be better as a GIF performance-wise. Compress your images. We want to compress our JPEGs. We want to use file formats like WebP that enables the browser to get a much more compressed file. We have also SVGO, and there's another extension of Firefox that I don't remember, that you can also get your files. Use a CDN. CDN is great. Cloudinary is a good example because it brings you all the files that you need at the proper resolution that you want. It brings you already the optimized file per your browser, the proper file extension. And have image fallbacks. So there's the image source set, okay? And here you can have you can define for which size, which file you're going to present. And another way to do it is with the picture tag. And you can define all the source set that you want, and the image is the fallback. Don't forget the image. It's the fallback. Critical rendering path. Okay, so you all know the DOM tree. The DOM tree contains all the HTML elements. I hope all of you know the CSS OM tree, and which contains all our CSS. The compiled version of that is the render tree. Okay, the render tree is compiled of both and presents us the HTML that we know and like. So we want to prioritize which elements is most crucial for the initial page load. Okay. Which element do we see first in our app? We want to make it as fast as possible. We don't need to render all the app. We don't need to render all the orientations of the app. We want to make it as smart as possible. Server-side rendering really, really helps us here. Then we can get from the initial page load the initial page load that we already want from the server. Sorry if I'm too quick. It's like a lightning talk. Okay. Asset caching. Okay, we want to cache content. Okay, like we talked about before. But as you can see in this amazing diagram I did, so we can, instead of going to the origin server, we can go to a CDN nearby us and have the resource much faster. We want to cache HTTP requests using the header cache control, which can provide for each file the maximum age or time it's going to be cached on our browser. And local cache, we can use we can use the local cache on our app platform, so we can beneficial with faster load time. We can enjoy it with PWAs. We can enjoy it in an offline view, and we don't need to re-request the resources that we need for our website. And of course, last but not least, and this is something a lot of people miss, is optimized animations. Okay, you want to give your CSS a heads up. A nice way to do it is with the will change CSS property. Tell him you're going to go from opacity to transform, meaning it's not going to block the page load because the CSS will compile and will know not to block the paint. Avoid set interval and set timeout. Okay, prefer to use the request animation frame. The request animation frame will help you avoid running animations when the users tab is invisible, which will also save the repaint. And get to know the animation API. It's pretty standard. You can really know when to picture or when to animate something. You can have better control of it. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Very experienced developer. Okay, you shared his knowledge with us, so thank you very much again. While we're setting up with all the things, right? Let me just thank our sponsors again, Melio, which does cool things when, I didn't hear about them before it started sponsoring the group, and they actually have a cool tagline, which they help small business stay in business, which I think is a worthy goal. So thank you again for having us and supporting the community. And yeah, as I said, just like mentioning, again, Pecan who's also doing Pecan AI, predictive analytics, which is cool, and also probably hiring. And we are hiring, okay? So we look for experienced JavaScript developers at high-res if you want to work with me and other cool people. Not like me, I'm not the cool people in the cool people. I don't know English. Anyway, so come and talk to me afterwards. And now, okay, just I wrote in the group about the background, how we got to talk. We have like a conference here. know? It's like people pay a lot of money to see like Misko and, you know, Michelle by accident, but Michelle well and Benji, and like it's like a mini JavaScript Israel conference. So you're the first one in the conference. You should be proud. Okay, awesome. So Misko is always working on crazy stuff. First time I heard about this guy was in his Google Dev Talks back in 2008 or something like that, about clean code and testing and all that stuff. And then when Angular came out, I was like, hey, I know this guy. I saw him in the YouTube from before. And we became friends over the years because of Angular. I gave him a t-shirt and he loved me after that. So we stayed friends. And we'll see the presentation of the wedding afterwards. Okay, and I'm super excited about this talk and about what he's working on. And with that, let's all give a big round of applause, like Israeli style.
I think this is on, right?
I will do like this.
Really?
This is Shchuna. Shchuna, you remember Shchuna?
It's a hood.
Hood.
Okay, yeah.
Shchuna. Okay. So
Well, when I start typing, then I need you to hold that. Okay.
yeah, I will.
So I have to talk here, but this is for the other mic.
Yeah, this is
Cool. Hey, so glad to be here, and I'm kind of jealous, man. I wish I could entertain a crowd like Shai can. I usually get excited about what I present, and then I go at 50 miles an hour. So tell me to stop, slow down, so that I don't get too excited. First of all, show of hands, who was here for the presentation that I did online last time? Oh, not that many. So if I repeat a lot of stuff, it's going to be fine. Shai was like, make sure you show them different stuff that you haven't shown them before.
value.
Value add, yes. Okay. So for those of you who have been here before, I apologize if I do the same talk. But for the rest of you guys, we're going to talk about Qwik and cool technologies we make, et cetera, et cetera. So let's just get started, right? Here. Wait, that's the wrong page. All right. I'm going to try to intentionally make it like easygoing talk. So we're going to talk about Qwik. And yeah, that's me. Currently, I'm a CTO at Builder. And I need to explain a little bit what Builder does so that we can kind of see how it all fits in with Qwik, et cetera. So we do this thing called a visual development platform, which is basically this editor you see on the right. And this is how it basically works. You build a website that's on the left, and your marketing department comes to you and says, we actually want the website on the right. And you say, well, no problem, that's easy, right? I'm just going to change this, that, and the other thing, and I'm done. Except the problem is, this doesn't stop. They will keep coming, and it will just never, never end. And so you say, no problem, I know how to do, I'm an engineer. I will put a bunch of data bindings in a few places, and I will data bind to some CMS system, and then they can just do their thing, and they don't have to bother me. Except they still won't stop, because they will come back and says, you know, this week we're having 2 cells instead of 1, and there's no way for us to enter 2 cells in here. We need the color to be red instead of blue. We need this, we need that. And so you will forever be changing these data bindings, and you still won't make them happy. So what you can do is you can install Builder.
But
And then-
that's how we make money, Misko.
Well, but as an engineer, you want to work on the value add, the stuff that like the components and things of that sort, right? You really don't want to be changing the homepage. So what you do is you take this thing and you cut it out, and you replace it with Builder content, and then this is the important bit. You see on the bottom where it says register component? These are the components that you as engineers built, and you register with us, and then you paste it into this editor, and then the marketing department can do whatever they want over there, but you build up the components, the individual building blocks, et cetera, and you decide what they want to build, and so on and so forth. So as you can imagine, a lot of our customers are e-commerce websites, and a lot of our customers care about speed, and they always come to us and say, hey, how do we make our e-commerce sites even faster? Like, it's a constant request. And so the cool thing about this is that we can generate code for any framework. We have this tool called Mitosis, and Mitosis can take this editor's output and generate code for Angular, for Vue, for Svelte, for React, for web components, whatever technology you happen to be using, we know how to generate code for you. And guess what? Doesn't matter which technology you use, your website is probably not going to be so good on Google Core Web Vitals. So the thing we discovered is that existing technologies are basically super heavy on JavaScript. And this is where Qwik comes in, right?
So we have all these customers that come to us, and they all say, it's just not fast enough. We want the website to be even faster. What do we do? What do we do? And so you go to Core Web Vitals, and the Core Web Vitals tells you what to do. It says on the bottom, at the top, big letters, says, ship less JavaScript, right? And it's true. It's a perfect advice. But I equate it to like saying, I want to be rich. What do I do? And the answer is, make more money, right? Absolutely true, not exactly helpful, because what exactly are you supposed to do to ship less JavaScript? And so the issue at hand is that we have these wonderful tools that allow us to have great developer experience. Am I speaking too fast, by the way? Should I slow down? OK. But they don't really think about the lazy loading part, or rather how to ship less JavaScript. And so this is where Qwik comes in. Qwik really tries to figure out how to essentially ship as little as possible. The starting point is essentially 0 kilobytes, and then go from there. So and we're going to talk about this. We're going to show you some demos and how to build things, et cetera. So the goal basically is ship less JavaScript. And the reason for that is because, well, Google cares about it, because Google understands that if you have a slow website, you're unhappy as a customer. And so you want to have, Google wants to make its customers happy, and it wants to funnel traffic to sites that are fast. So Google page speed actually feeds into SEO rank. And if you're a business, you understand that if it takes forever to click on a buy button, you're going to lose a lot of customers because it takes forever to click on a buy button, right? So there's a lot of money involved in here. And there's lots of studies that basically show the faster your website is, the better your conversion rates, the more sales, et cetera. And nobody knows this better than Amazon. So if you look at Amazon, they're in the yellow. They're not green. But nevertheless, they have basically unlimited resources to make the website as fast as possible. And even they can't get to the green, right? So there's something wrong with the industry, because if you look across, you will see just pretty much everybody's in the red. Everybody, right? No real-world e-commerce website that I know of is in the green. Sure, there's toy websites that people put up and say, look, I'm in the green, right? But once you add all kinds of stuff to it, it doesn't, it quickly comes down. So Amazon cares a lot, has the best engineers in the world, all the money in the world, and they can only get 67, right? So my argument here is that the problem isn't developers. It's not like you're hiring bad developers that kind of mess things up. The problem is that our tools are kind of against us, not intentionally, but they're not doing us much favors. And the funny thing about the whole setup is that when a website is slow, we automatically blame the developers. We're like, yeah, that company has crappy developers. That's why they're over there. The thing is, if that were true, then you should be able to see some websites that have good developers and have green scores. But such websites are a myth. They just don't exist. So I don't think blaming the developers is actually a fair thing to do. OK, so why are the websites slow? And the answer is JavaScript. Over time, the amount of JavaScript is just going up, 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 up. And this is not going to stop. And people will say, well, but Amazon, was 15 years ago, and you could buy stuff. So why, is it so much bigger now? And the answer is, well, they just do more things now, right? It's not the same website. Today, for example, when I go to Amazon and I want to go buy windshield wipers, the Amazon actually knows what car I have, and it will only show me the stuff for my car, which I think is kind of cool, right? But imagine, it's not just car. It's about just about anything that you can imagine. They have a special use case for all this stuff. And so these sites are actually getting more powerful. And so to argue that it's the same site, I think, is unfair. So anyways, the problem is the amount of JavaScript is going up, 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 and we need to do something about it. So maybe in the interest of time, I'm going to skip this slide. But these are the top 50 e-commerce websites that we have, that we looked at. And what you can see over there is that the first column is all red, right? There's nobody in the green. There's few of them in the yellow, but for the most part, it's all red. And the thing to notice is that if we take this website, actually, maybe I should talk about this. Sorry. We have this performance insight thing that you can take a website like Priceline, and you can feed it into, and what it does is just sends it to Google PageSpeed and gets a score back. And so Priceline gets a score of 36 out of the box without any changes. And then what we do is we optimize it by optimizing the images. And then we feed it back into Google PageSpeed. And we get the same exact score, which means they already did a good job on optimizing the images. We do the same thing for CSS, same score, meaning already did a good job of optimizing the CSS. And then we delete the JavaScript, and bam, it's an amazing website. Right? So clearly, JavaScript is the problem. And what this shows that if you look at it as an industry, for the most part, everybody's doing a good job optimizing images. Everybody's doing a good job optimizing CSS. JavaScript, not so much. You know, we could get a huge improvement. And this basically shows you that if we could optimize the JavaScript images, we could get everybody up to 83, which would be amazing. Sorry, not images, JavaScript. So what is the problem? Why do we ship so much JavaScript into the browser? And so in one word, the word is hydration. How many people know what hydration is? OK, good, most of you. So I think it's important to understand history of how we got here, right? So originally, we had jQuery. And then there was these single-page applications. Yeah, hoo-hoo for jQuery. That was an amazing piece of technology. And then we had this thing called AngularJS. And then the world kind of transitioned from building the applications using jQuery to using component systems, right? And then AngularJS was kind of one of the first. But then, today you have gazillion frameworks to choose from. React, Angular, Vue, React, Svelte, Solid, whatever you want. But they all kind of work fundamentally the same way. And the reason for that is when these frameworks were designed, server-side rendering really wasn't a thing. And so they really aren't designed with server-side rendering in mind. So what happens is you ship HTML to the browser, right? And it's dead. It doesn't do anything. And you want to make it interactive. And so you have to bootstrap it somehow. You have to do something to it to make it interactive. And what really that means is that you have to attach listeners to the right places in the DOM in order to make it interactive. And so how do you do that? Well, in order to figure out where the listeners are, you have to run the render function, because the render function has the information about the listeners. Great. So you have to get to the render function. How do you get the render function? Well, render function is basically a merge between data and a template. So you need to get the data. How do you get the data? Well, you execute the application. And so, what you discover very quickly is that in order for you to figure out where the listeners are, you have to download the application, execute the application, and reconcile the DOM of the ones that you executed with the actual HTML that you got from the server. And this bit over here is problematic for two reasons. First is that you eagerly are forced to download the whole application. And the second reason is that you have to actually execute the application. Like if you had to download it but not execute it, the world wouldn't be so bad. But the fact that you have to download it and execute it, that really makes it hurt. And so I'm representing this with a thick arrow saying lots of stuff has to come down here. And so Qwik has this idea of resumability. So it's the same exact idea. You start with server-side rendering. But the HTML that you send to the client has information annotated inside of the HTML in the form of attributes where the listeners are. And because it's annotated in there, we have super tiny bootstrap piece of code, which is about 1 kilobyte, and it takes about 1 millisecond to execute, so really nothing. And this allows you to go all the way to the interactive state. You can bypass everything and just go straight to interactive. Right? And now you can interact with your page. And when you interact with the page, the system can lazily download the code. Now, notice this arrow here is thin. This one is fat. Because one of the things the system knows how to do is you take your application and break it up into lots and lots of small chunks. And that's a key bit. So we download the small chunk. And we only download the chunk that's necessary. So if you're on an Amazon website, if you say add to shopping cart, then we need to download the code, which is the handler for the shopping cart. And we need to probably download the code for updating the shopping cart number, so the template representing the component by the shopping cart, right? So the amount of code that you have to download is way less, right? You don't have to download the menu system. You don't have to download maybe the logout button, the comment sections on the bottom. There's many things that you don't have to download if you can just focus on the actual behavior. And so, yes, the code is being downloaded lazily, but it's so little of it that it actually makes the situation better. Now, before anybody says, isn't there a delay when you click? No, because there is prefetching that can happen, and we can get into the prefetching as well. So that's kind of the big difference, right? So we're getting rid of this huge arrow. And this huge arrow here is really where the delay comes from. I'm going to take a little detour. How many people heard of Partytown? Yay. OK, so for the rest of you, here's a quick description of what a Partytown is. And then we're going to jump into some cool demos. So Partytown. So there's two kinds of code that you write, right? You write your first-party code, which is the application that you're writing. And so you start out with your app, and you probably get good scores, and you are very, very happy. And at some point, you say, this is ready for production. And the marketing shows up and says, yes, but you need analytics. You need Facebook Pixel. You need Intercom. You need Amplitude, HubSpot. And they add like 20 scripts. And I'm not exaggerating here. 20 is the average number of scripts that Google reports that are on a page. Okay? So you just download a ridiculous number of third-party scripts. And these third-party scripts will fight for the main thread, right? So not only is your application trying to start up and trying to execute and reconcile and get everything ready so that it's interactive, at the same exact time, the third-party scripts are also waking up and they're doing the same thing. They're like, oh, I'm a Google tag manager. I would like to know about where you click. So let me set up some global listeners all over the place. And also, I want to know what page you happen to be on. So let me read your title, and maybe it reads cookies or who knows what else, right? Whole bunch of things are happening like crazy on the main thread. So what Partytown does is it says, you know what, let's take the third-party code and move it to the web worker. Because it's a separate thread. All modern devices have multiple CPU cores. Why don't we just move it over there so that we don't have to run it on the main thread? And that frees up the main thread to do more useful things. Now, this is much harder than it sounds. Like, this is kind of like the obvious thing. If you look at it and you go like, of course, just move it to the web worker thread. Like, it's easy. There are some complications. First complication is that in order for Google Tag Manager to be useful, it has to set up listener on your DOM. So if you put it on a web worker, there is no DOM in the web worker, not useful anymore. So what you need to do is you need to recreate the DOM in a web worker. Not just any DOM will do. It has to be the actual DOM that's on the main thread. And so what Partytown creates is a proxy to all of the APIs that exist on your main thread in the web worker thread so that Google Tag Manager or whatever tool you happen to have can execute in the web worker thread. Now, there's a tiny little catch, right? So far what I've said, none of this stuff is really kind of earth-shattering. A lot of people had this idea before. The problem is you can't make a synchronous call from the web worker thread to the main thread. And this is where kind of your hopes get shattered because it's like, Google Tag Manager expects to synchronously read your title. And if you can't deliver it, you'll break the Tag Manager. So how do you do this if you can't make synchronous calls to the web worker? So the cool thing about Partytown is that we figured out how to make a synchronous call from the web worker to the main thread. And therefore, we can successfully offload Tag Manager or whatever third-party script you have into the web worker where it can do its magic, and it can do it without affecting the main thread. In other words, we kind of brought multi-threading into JavaScript for third-party code. OK, I'm not going to go much deeper into this other than it exists. You should totally install it, because if you do, you immediately move your third-party code into a separate thread, and your Google page speed score will go up. We have seen as much as 20-point increase just by installing this. So this is like a no-brainer. It works with every framework out there. You should just do this. All right, let's move to demos. And I need both of my hands, so I need my assistant, lovely assistant, Shai. Yeah, hi, how's it going?
Good.
OK, so font, right? How's font? Is it people can see? Is it a good size font? OK, so how many of these demos have you guys seen? Who's seen any of these demos? OK, one person to be so I apologize for you who's already seen it. Most of the other ones have not. OK, and so we also need hello world and font here, font, and this, and font. How's that? Yes, no, bigger? Bigger, right? Good size? OK, so here is hello world. Ta-da! Nothing exciting over here, right? The exciting bit is over here. So I have this selected to only show JavaScript. Obviously, if I show everything, there's a bunch of other things that shows up. But it's just JavaScript, right? This is what we care about. And so this static hello world brings no JavaScript. And yeah, that's not that exciting. I mean, it's static, right? But if you think about it, most frameworks can't really differentiate if something is static or not, and so they'll download anyways and try to rehydrate and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in that sense, it's kind of cool, but not really. The other thing I want to show you is that this is how you write a component. For those of you who are familiar with React, you look at this and be like, yeah, this looks exactly like React. There's really very little difference. And that's not a coincidence. One of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to take what's popular and bring in the added value. And the added value is not really the developer experience, but the added value is the things that the framework can do. So really, we want to focus on this magical bit that the other frameworks cannot do. And when I do these presentations, I really want you to be thinking about, like, how would I do this in my other framework? Like, what magical bits would I have to do to kind of get this? So yeah, no special kind of complicated way of expressing a component. So that's about all I want to say for this. And you get a static page and no JavaScript is downloaded. Not that exciting. So let's do something more complicated. Let's do a counter. And a counter has two buttons. One is click, which increases the count. And the second one is hello, that says hello to you. But let me refresh the page again. And actually, let me make this side bigger as well. And look again, no JavaScript, right? No JavaScript here. And when I click on a button, code downloads. And when I click on the other button, more code downloads. How does that work? Like, how does, what kind of a weird wizardry is that? So, you like that, Shai? Yeah. Okay. I can continue. Okay. So, we start with server-side pre-rendering. So we send HTML over, like I'm sure you know how that works. But the difference is that in the HTML, you have click listeners, right? So it says on click, and there is a URL which basically says, where do I go and download the code if you click on it? And of course, you need to have a little bit of JavaScript. So here's the quick loader, right? This is the 1 kilobyte thing that executes super quickly. So every page automatically gets it, and we inline it in because it's so small that we don't think it's even worth to make a separate request for it, and so we want to have it inlined. So that's basically this page. And yeah, we have these magical buttons here that do the work. Now, what is interesting about this bit is how you author the component. So let's do a counter. And so we have a counter component. And in here, we say that it's a component. I'll explain the $ in a second. And we create a store. So we say, hey, we're going to have a store over here. This looks awfully like MobX. Yeah, it creates a proxy, and it listens to things. I don't know who came up with that idea, but like high five to that person.
You could high five him in the panel.
Oh, okay. So what this actually does is it creates a proxy. If you want to know more about this, I think there's a person here in the audience who will explain more how this works. And when you read from the proxy, it creates a subscription and everything. Anyways, so the hard part is this, though. This is a single file, single component. How in the world did we end up with 3 separate downloads? So we have 1 and 2. If I click, oh, sorry, I have to click this button here first. And there's 3 files over here, right? So the first file basically said that we extracted just the alert. Nothing else. Look, no framework imports, nothing. We just extracted alert. So when you click on this button right here, what the $ means is that this bit over here needs to be extracted into a separate lazy loaded bit, right? So the system was smart enough to be like, oh yeah, this thing right here, we can extract out into a file. So basically, we do something like this. Export foo equals this, right? Oops. And this happens automatically. And so you say, well, that kind of is cool, and that's exciting, and that's kind of neat. But let me show you what happens when I try to do the same exact thing for the second bit.
You have a thing with $signs.
Yeah.
Watch, like money. Are you Jewish?
I don't know. Maybe there's some deep down heritage in there. OK. So notice what I did. When I extracted the code, I broke the code, right? Because the bar, I mean, foo was a function that could be extracted. But bar can't be extracted because it's a closure, right? It closes over this variable store that is in its lexical scope. And if you pull it out, you've just broken the program. And so this is where kind of the magic comes in. I'm going to undo this so you can see the magic. I'm going to undo all of this. What we do is, instead of exporting it like so, which breaks it, we have to rearrange the code like this, where we say, restore the lexical scope, give us back the store, and now we can execute it. And this restoring of lexical scope is really the magical bit and the bit why we get to call ourselves resumable. Because as long as we can restore the state of the system, we can just continue where we left off. No need to re-execute anything, right? And so really, behind this use lexical scope lies the framework, right? This is actually imported from the framework. And this use lexical store is the thing that can restore the state of the system and can continue where it left off. And it is, restoring the state is really just JSON.parse. So it's super cheap, and it can be done lazily. And so that's how the system works. So let's look at it again. And notice two funny things here. So the button that just says hello, right, the one that doesn't have lexical scoping, it just says this is the URL, and then this is the symbol where you need to execute. The other button that says click, which actually captured the store, that one has this bracket 0 behind. And this bracket 0 is important because it points to the JSON, which points to the objects, the 0th object right here, which says you need to have an object, a state, which is count 10. So when you go and execute it, and when we execute a piece of code on it that says store.count++, we know that we start at 10, and we're incrementing it to 11, and therefore the application can continue. OK, so that's the first part of the puzzle. The second part of the puzzle is, well, how does a system supposed to know that it has to re-render something, right? Existing frameworks, I know you can still stay here because I'm going to need it, but like when I talk about stuff, sorry, it feels a little awkward.
It's a Monday.
It's a Monday. Yes, it is a Monday. No, it's a Sunday. OK. Where was I? I got derailed. Right, so how do we know to go and download? So let's look at the network tab again. When I refresh this and I hit hello, only the alert code got downloaded and nothing else, right? So if I click on it.
How do you know which part to render?
Right, well, where's this stuff? Why is this thing not showing anything? Anyways, when, oh, because I have to click OK, duh. OK, thank you. I do know how to use a computer. So here's the alert that shows up over here. Right now, when I click on a second button, I again get downloaded just a function right here. But then I also download this restore lexical scope that kind of consumes the JSON that I showed you over earlier, and then does the incrementation. The question is, how do we jump from here to here, which downloads the counter so that it can re-render it? And the answer for that is it's all stored inside of our state. And so our state contains our objects. These are listed over here. And it also contains subscriptions. And so in this particular case, what it says is that if you go and modify the count property of the state, then you need to invalidate object 0, or rather component 0. And so component 0 is right here. That's this guy over here. And if you follow the pointers all over the place, you eventually get to this URL over here that basically says, go download this piece of code, and then that's the symbol that's being exported that you have to execute in order to re-render the component. Now, the reason why this is important is that if you don't have this bit and you modify the state, let's say you're in Angular or in React, the problem is that these frameworks are not actually reactive frameworks, and so you don't know which component to re-render, and so you kind of throw your hands up and say, screw it, I'm just going to re-render everything. And the moment you re-render everything, you just lost, because re-rendering everything means you have to download code for everything, right? And so what we want to be here is extremely surgical about, like, we just want to touch the most necessary things and nothing else, right? So we need to be reactive. So you say, no, no problem. Svelte's reactive. So can't we just use Svelte? Can't Svelte do this? And the answer is no again. And the reason for that is because in order for a system to be reactive, including MobX falls into this category as well, it has to execute everything at least once to figure out what the subscriptions are. And no different for us. We also have to execute at least once. But we do it on a server, save all that information, and ship to the information in the form of subscriptions to the client. And now the client doesn't have to do that. So Svelte is forced to download everything because it needs to figure out what the relationships are. And once it figures out all the relationships, then it can be super smart about it. But by that point, too late. You already paid the price. You already downloaded everything. So you don't get to have any benefits. Same thing for Angular, React, etc. All the frameworks basically end up in a situation where they have to download everything before they can reason about the system, and it's too late. OK. So I said you should be thinking about like how would you implement this in your framework of your choice. And the thing I want to kind of point out, oh, the foo is there. The thing I want to point out is that what's hard here is that if you're writing in the existing system, you don't have, like, the framework doesn't care about breaking your application up into pieces. Framework basically says, not my problem, you deal with bundling and you deal with breaking up your application into pieces. And so because it's not the framework's problem, you end up either not doing it, or by the time you want to do it, it's such a convoluted mess that breaking things up is essentially impossible. And then even if you try breaking it up, you'll discover very quickly that it's extremely difficult because the rendering pipelines of all existing frameworks are synchronous, and lazy loading is asynchronous. And you can't take a lazy loaded asynchronous promise and shove it into a synchronous rendering pipeline. That just does not work. And so no matter how you slice it, you discover that like it just doesn't work. Little tangent over here. If I'm doing too long on time, just hit me over the head or something.
I'm here.
Here, OK. A little tangent over here is that when I started this project, I really didn't want to invent anything. I was like, how do I not invent anything? And I looked into React, I looked into lit HTML, I looked into a bunch of different renderers, and I was like, could I just somehow reuse the rendering system and just add the magic around it? In each case, I kind of came up with the answer as being, no, I cannot. Rendering and lazy loading are so tightly coupled that you can't break it up. And what's unique about Qwik is that if you look at existing frameworks, they basically say, what is my job? And the answer is, my job is rendering. And that's kind of the tunnel vision that they have. And they don't care about anything else. They just care about rendering, and that's it. And then people are like, yeah, but we need like server-side pre-rendering, and so they cobble together something, and whatever you cobble together something, it's kind of a hack. It's not really meant for this. It's not really working great. It works, but not great. And this is why we have hydration, right? And so the difference with Qwik is that Qwik says, what is my responsibility? And instead of saying it's just rendering, it says, no, 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 no. Rendering is the thing we do as well. Obviously, we have to. But I also care about bundling, creating entry points for the bundlers. I care about server-side rendering. I care about serialization, moving the data from the server to the client. All of the things that you need for having an application, all of there are in the domain of Qwik. Like Qwik says, this is my business. I care about these bits. And because Qwik cares about all these bits, it can do something that other frameworks cannot do. And that bit is basically that we have this tool called Optimizer, which is kind of like a pre-bundler that runs before a rollup runs. And what the bundler can do is it can break up your code and do transformations on it. But normally, bundler also does transformation on a code, but bundler can't semantically change your code. That's not allowed, because then it will break the framework, and bundler and the frameworks don't talk to each other. But in the case of a Qwik, they do talk to each other, and so our bundler can do things that are technically breaking, but it's OK because it understands how the runtime works, and the runtime and the bundler cooperate. And because the runtime and the bundler cooperate, we can do stuff that nobody else can. Right? And not only that nobody else can, I'm going to go on a limb and basically say they won't be able to do it even if they tried. Because if they would try to do it, they would so significantly change the semantics of the framework is that they would create a brand new framework that would be incompatible with all of their existing libraries. So for other frameworks to come in here and say, yeah, we're going to add this as a feature, would mean that they are giving up on all of the documentation, all of the third-party ecosystem that they have, all the learnings that the existing people have, all of that stuff they would have to give up. And I'm going to say, I don't think anybody is going to be ambitious enough to do that. So nobody's going to do that. So I'm going to go on a limb here and say existing frameworks cannot ever do this.
Sounds familiar, the breaking of the old API and the new API.
What are you talking about? I have no idea. That was low, Shy.
No, I'm here. We love you. We love Misko.
Yes, I love breaking shit.
It's not you. You had, you can blame the others.
Okay, so the thing is, if I was to ask you, like, build me a site which doesn't download code until you click on it, you're going to have a hard time doing it, right? Whereas with Qwik, like, it's just how the framework works, so there's nothing for you to do. Okay, I'm going to skip the reactivity bit.
Okay, do you want to
Do a time check? I don't want to show the clock because I think the clock is super cool.
Okay.
There is so many cool demos I have, and yeah, he wasn't letting me speak.
Okay. Well.
No? Okay, fine.
You want to show the demo, no?
Yeah. Okay, so here's the demo. Here's the demo. We have a bunch of code, and when you scroll to the bottom, there is a clock, or the 3 clocks actually, I lied. And the cool thing about it is that no JavaScript. And when you scroll them into the view, JavaScript downloads and executes. And it even gets better. So if you look at the DOM, and here's our clocks over here. And if I open the clock, and this is our minute-hour hands, and this is the rotation of the hand, right? And so when I scroll it into the position, it starts updating every 1 second, right? And if I scroll the next one into the position, again, nothing's updating. Second one comes up, and it starts updating. Isn't that cool? Like, how would you do this? How would you do this in the existing frameworks? Like, good luck. And I want to show you how easy it is with Qwik. So we have this clock app. All it does is it just produces a bunch of text so that stuff is below the fold. And here is my 3 clocks that I've inserted over here. And the clock component says, there is some styling you have to load. Here is our store, which is basically the angle of the hands. And this is the magical bit. It says use client effect, which means do some work, but only on the client. And the work basically says, there's an update function that grabs the time, computes the second, minute, hour hand, and then calls the updates and calls it every 1 second. So this is not anything hard. The hard part is not delaying this thing and knowing when to load it. So when you have use client effect on existing systems, what they do is they say, well, that's easy. We'll just run it when the framework wakes up, when it boots up, when it hydrates, right? When we call the hydrate, wake up, or whatever method, that's when this thing wakes up and does its own magic. Except Qwik doesn't really have like most systems have like a main entry point where you enter and you do hydration and then a system runs. But if you have a main entry point, then you're actually lost because from the main, you go to the root component, from the root component, you go to the children component, from the children component, you go to the sub-children component, right? And so you download everything. And so instead, we just have to resume where we left off. And so the question becomes, well, when do we resume this particular component? And so that you can pass an extra argument here, but the default argument says, resume the component when it becomes visible. And so by default, you get this beautiful behavior where nothing happens, you scroll into the view, and you wake up the component and it starts executing. Now, we don't have this implemented yet, but I really want to implement the fact that when I scroll out of the view, it should just shut it down. And then you have the best of all the worlds where you can do this. OK, so apparently we're out of time.
But we still have time for the,
So, OK, the QwikCity.
Yeah.
OK, so what is QwikCity? This thing right here is built using QwikCity. So this is our homepage. And QwikCity is like the Angular Universal or the Next.js, or Vue has SvelteKit, right? Sorry, Vue has Nuxt, right? Nuxt. And again, this was a situation where like we looked really hard at Next.js. We looked really hard on what is the super popular one on Remix. We looked at all of them and we said, could we just reuse them somehow? Because we really didn't want to rebuild QwikCity. And unfortunately, the answer is no, because they're so fundamentally different. Like the way you think about it, the way you deal with it, the way you deliver JavaScript, everything is just so different. It just doesn't fit into the mental model of the existing systems. So what I like about this QwikCity is that we have file-based routing, exactly as you would imagine. We have all the bits, but one of the things that we can do is we want to make sure that if you click on this, it's instant on, right? So if you look at the network tab, we still have to download the code, except that if you refresh, okay, click. Wait, why is it broken? Oh, is it because this? Okay, here we go. So because the disabled cache was off, that's why it got broken. So what we do is we set up prefetching. And notice when you actually go and fetch the code, it's hard to see, but it actually says prefetch cache, right? And you can see that it says prefetch over here on the beginning. And the reason that works is because when we go to the bottom, we generate links. So the way this works is that when we run the application on a server, we look at all the components and we learn a lot about your application because we actually run the application. It's not a static analysis, it's runtime analysis. We can look at it and we can see which components have data, which components have subscriptions, which subscriptions are subscribed to what. We can see which listeners exist in the system, and we can see if a listener has a reference to a store. And this graph allows us to basically tree shake, but not the code, but the data. And we can throw away a whole bunch of stuff that we know, like, technically, this is data that at one point was needed to render the application. But looking at the application in the client, we actually can tell that none of this stuff is required. And we can all be thrown away. And so after we throw away all the data, we end up with a set of routes that are required to be shipped to the client. And this set of routes produces these URLs that are prefetchable. What these prefetchable URLs basically do is tell the system, like, hey, you need to go this, this, and that. And because these URLs get prefetched, your interaction becomes instant, right? If you click on a button, it's an instant interaction. There's really nothing for the system to execute. But we also were able to look at the page and throw away a lot of stuff. So if your use case is a use case that falls into the category of Remix, Nuxt, etc., all these frameworks, then we have QwikCity. And QwikCity is this file-based routing. Microphone holder, thank you.
I take dollars afterwards.
Yeah, like my
Component
taxi
dollar.
cab. Oops. Come on, how do I make this big? Here we go. So the way you do this is you say npm create Qwik.
Create.
What did I do? Oh, create.
Pair programming.
Qwik. OK. And you will say, what do you want to do? I want to say Qwik Israel. That doesn't look right.
No, Israel.
And you select QwikCity, Express, prettier sure, and we can do code dot. And we can, oh yeah, in here, we can then do control.
You're in the home page. You need to go inside the folder you created.
Oh, oops, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank
Don't
you.
share your visa number.
Qwik dash. npm install.
Yeah, you're sure you want to do npm install now?
Well,
We need to show it. Yeah.
yeah.
So anybody got a cool story while we're starting?
Bad joke. How do functions break up? They stop calling each other.
All day like this. All day.
You don't like my joke, man?
I like your joke. What? My face is like, this is my like face.
All right. So we should be able to go to oops, it's not what I wanted here. There you go. And so this is kind of a basic skeleton of QwikCity. And here you can come and add pages, etc. And you get the same cool.
This is like brand new, right?
This is brand new. This just got released. It is so new that we're going to have another release soon. Right now we only support, unfortunately, MDX format, but TSX is coming like any day now. We already have it working. We just have to land the PR. The cool thing is you have your documentation. Let's say there's an increment component in the middle. So let's, again, do this is not responsive, huh? Network tab. And by this point, you're not impressed anymore that there is no JavaScript downloaded, right? And there is a component here. If I click, of course, the counter gets downloaded and executed, and it updates the count. This is it. Control J. And how does this work? So we have, you set up your layouts, and you have your pages. Inside of the index, you kind of do what the menu system on the left. And for example, if you go to index MDX, you can write your code. You can import your component. In this case, it's a counter. And you can drop it inside of your code base in here. And of course, everything is set up with prefetching and all the pieces so that this page should continue to have 0 JavaScript, and then no matter how complicated your website gets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So how do you add like a route?
So in this case, this is a file-based routing, so we could add, let's add route.
You have already a route, each page is a route?
Each page is a route.
MDX?
MDX.
MDEX.
It's like MD, but like with...
MDEX.
Oh, MEDX.
MEDX.
I was just checking if you're paying attention.
Yeah. Pair programming. Together with Misko.
Okay, so now if we go to, oops. Shy. Ta-da! Wait,
Yeah,
what?
not found.
Not ready for.
that gives us modularity. It's good. It didn't use years ago, you had components, but you couldn't just reuse them freely anywhere. So this is good. Everything does code splitting. Like some frameworks do it better. Misko talked about Qwik. Qwik does code splitting better than Angular, but it's still like pretty basic. The ideas he is exploring are so good because they're like the gate to like they're the floodgates. When we break them, we're going to do amazing things. And then there's reactivity, which virtually everyone but Angular and React does. So these are like reactive things on a scale. So Vue is reactive, Svelte is reactive, Salt is reactive. There's like Qwik is reactive. Michel is reactive, like he's here. If he's here, this is like the most reactive person in the world, Eric Meyer. He's like super reactive. And our framework is obviously reactive. The way to improve here is that all the frameworks today, they pretty much, like Michel said, like Misko said, they do the same thing. They use proxies. The place this fails is when you have long lists and data structures. Let's say you have an array and you dot filter it every time in a computed value. It really doesn't make a lot of sense to do that computation over and over. So we can definitely improve there. Everyone does SSR and server-side generation. You can't get good SEO without it. We can like tune the amount of generation based on statistical data. Sorry, I'm hearing myself, so I'm just going to turn off the volume real quick. We can actually calculate the amount of server-side rendering we do based on statistical data and user workflows. OK, so now we're getting to the fun part. Once the framework is aware of everything, of the components, of like what the app should look like, we can like take snapshots of the app and using visual testing and like testing tools, shrink your code. Because like here's two examples of code that does the same thing, right? This like creates an observed value, and it uses that value, but that value isn't actually used anywhere. We can do that and like do a more advanced form of dead code elimination by just checking the app is functionally the same, analyzing user flows, and just deleting code that isn't used. Using like we take your component, we refactor it, we see if the output is still the same, and if it is, great. Which gets us smaller HTML bundles. It gives us automatic deduplication of code. If you have code that repeats in several places, it does better than gzip, which is basically what you have today. We can replace CSS with smarter CSS for smaller bundles. So let's say you wrote Flexbox, and you're targeting a browser that supports grid, and like the grid syntax is shorter. We can do that automatically for you. We can do dead stat elimination and not just dead code elimination because we are aware of your app. And we can profile your app in runtime based on real users and automatically replace parts of your components to improve performance, which is very hard to do if you don't have like the end-to-end integration. So all of this work is because Qwiker is aware of everything. It's end-to-end. It's not just the rendering. And this lets us do really cool stuff. For example, we don't need to serve the same bundle to all the browsers. Like, it makes no sense that a user on mobile Chrome and a user on like desktop Internet Explorer, which is, thank God, dead, will use the same, we get the same bundle. Maybe you have a checkout flow, which is common in contentful websites like the ones Misko talked about. That should get a different bundle that optimizes just the checkout flow. Maybe, yeah, this is just the checkout flow. So we don't just do this. This is Webpack, right? It takes stuff and bundles it together. We can create different bundles for the same site for different use cases. Yeah, and again, we can optimize that bundle for, which isn't what we always do. It depends on the website we are creating the bundle for. But we can create the optimize for SEO scores. The next thing we can do, what most frameworks do today, Qwik improves on that. We load bundles based on routes, which is really, really, really naive. It's not a good approach. What we want to do instead is we will look at what modules the user already has, because we know that, because we are holistic, and we will only load the files that are missing. And the way we get over the fact caching is missing is that we will push to the CDN the deltas of bundles based on common user flow. So if the user always goes to the home page and then the login page, It makes no sense to like load an entire new login bundle and not load just the delta between those flows. Right. What we do today, like the common practice, is we prioritize the resources for above the fold, right? There is the part the user is seeing and the part the user isn't seeing. That's not how users use websites. Like, I don't know about you, but when I enter most websites, I will scroll a bit sometimes. It depends on the content I'm seeing. If I am looking at a new iPhone, for example, I will usually scroll to the tech specs. And this is information you already have about your users, right? Your product departments already know what and where users scroll. So we can figure that out, and we can prioritize resources based on how they're actually used, rather than something naive like above or below the fold. And again, there's a bunch of stuff that's super not fun to set up, like APMs, like performance monitoring, interaction tracking, error monitoring, and we can do all that for you. You don't need to set up different tools for all those things. Those are part of the framework, which means Quicker understands your users. Because we have all your analytics, we can generate your tests for you. We can generate your end-to-end tests. We can generate your performance tests. We can generate accessibility tests. And those tests are going to give much better coverage than what you currently have, because they're based on what your users actually do. They're not based on like some hypothesis. And then we can do that with A/B tests. So for example, let's say you have a button. Instead of for the salesperson to say, hey, let's change that from like 10 to 15, they can run an experiment. And the framework, they will just say what the thresholds for all your components are. And the Quicker will do very smart multi-armed bandit A/B testing, and will automatically pick the right variants for you and prioritize them, because it's all part of the same framework. So once you define like a checkout flow in your end-to-end, which again is automatic based on what your users are doing, you just hit a button with the thresholds, and it will optimize everything. And of course, because it's so holistic, everything is compliant to accessibility and internationalization, which lets us like generate and improve accessibility. So we will look at how users are using your websites with screen readers, and we will automatically improve the screen reader experience based on how those interactions are happening. And this isn't limited to just like screen readers and accessibility, but it's where the impact is easiest, because a lot of websites just aren't very good with those users. Currently, we generate bundles based on like what the user sees. But we can generate bundles based on what users care about, right? If I have a website and there is like one piece of information the user actually cares about and a bunch of like fluff around and below it, and I have the analytics for the website, so I know what users are seeing and what users are clicking, I can change the bundle and like the rendering of the HTML to show a shimmer for the stuff the users care less about and progressively load that. So instead of just seeing above or below the fold, we get a much smarter rendering. And then we can segment that based on stuff like connection speed or geography or like any other piece of information about the user. Now this gets really cool. Remember, we generated our end-to-end tests, and we generated a bunch of stuff to validate our code, which we needed to do anyway. This lets us automatically refactor common libraries. So let's say you have a code using Axios, and you want to refactor to fetch. You use the same technology that GitHub Copilot uses, the GPT-3 model. Run it through your tests, and you get the code back with fetch, which saves around 40% of refactoring efforts in front-end development teams. We can also use the exact same technology, exact same concept, just to find, mitigate, and remediate very quickly supply chain attacks, XSS attacks, and other similar attacks. If there is a vulnerable library, we will automatically upgrade it in production, zero developer effort, run your tests, and things will happen automatically for you. This gives us also the ability, because we control the end-to-end test, the performance test, and the build, we can generate builds in under 3 minutes that will also run your entire test suite, your end-to-end, the performance test, accessibility test in parallel, and create a production deployment, which means developers using the platform automatically get a 3-minute end-to-end pipeline running thousands of tests concurrently and giving you confidence to deploy. We will do cache invalidation automatically. We will run machine learning models, again, over your user interactions, and we will do something way smarter than just saying, OK, there is a new version. Let's throw away all the client code, because client code is extremely important for websites that are entered more than once. And we will use service workers and edge computing to give you a hot reload-like experience. So you don't actually get a hot reload, because that's a very confusing experience for production. But you get the closest thing you can. We will convert with adapters. We don't actually take React and convert it to Qwik automatically to the components. So we have integrations baked in based on open source code for React, Angular, Vue, yada yada, for stuff like Gmail or Asana or Shopify to automatically pull those components, generate components for Quicker, and run them, which should save you a bunch of time. These are just a bunch of ideas for frameworks. This is our estimated market flow. So right now we have around 500 million users, and in a few years we'll have around 7 billion users. The business model is obviously, like everyone now, it's a SaaS subscription model, where there's going to be an on-prem version, which again, this is actually a good model, because everything here needs our server. It's not it's not a new idea. The framework itself is going to be open source. That's the common theme now. And there's addings requiring machine learning and server compute. That's going to be a SaaS model. What the users say. So here is Misko in 2018 saying, one day I will meet the famous Shai Resnick person. This is Shai saying, very original naming, I will buy a lot. And this is some dude no one knows saying, best thing ever. So this is good. And that's all the ideas I got. I try to keep it quick because they're over time. And I think I could keep questions to the panel in the same light. So before the thank you, we are hired at Microsoft to work on performance code. Feel free to ping me. If you want to work on Node.js and open source, feel free to ping me. And this is Moshe. He made his first pull request in Node that got merged today. So congrats, Moshe. Just to show it really happens. And thank you.
Thank you very much. So for all the confused people in the audience who were like, this is real? No, this was a satire / predictions of how things will look in the future. Because I saw some puzzled faces. What the hell? Where do I sign up? Okay. Okay, but actually, what's the best thing? Misko, are you paying attention? No, it's important now. So, some of the things he said, futuristic, and actually, I think you made the presentation a while ago, or 2 weeks ago, or something like that. And you didn't attend the talk before, but actually a lot of stuff Qwik is either doing or is on the near future work roadmap, which is kind of mind-blowing. So that's another cool part. When I saw the slide, it said hey, they do this and they do, hey. So okay, so we'll need no. We need this. If you can pass and Alon can help. Okay, and let's do a short panel and then we'll do a long beer. Okay, how does it sound? Cool. So let's welcome Michel Vestrate, Misko Hevery, Benji Greenbaum, and me, I will stand. I don't need the chair. I will. No, you're old. You need to sit. I need. That's true. It's like a dating show. Yeah, I cannot drink beer. Don't let me drink beer because then my stomach. You have neck mics for people. So, Michel, you pass it? Misko, and it will cover. Michel, just speak to his neck, okay? Okay, cool. So, this is the part. This is good. Let me know, Giddy, if this is a good setting in terms of if you don't see too many things. You need a backdrop? the backdrop?
No, it's okay.
It's okay? Okay. Cool. So, welcome to our improvised panel. Okay, we didn't plan to have it, but they said they're cool people, so they're good for photo ops. Okay. So I want to open it up for either questions, and also I will ask a bunch of questions just about like where you know, in terms of performance and you know, consideration stuff. So feel free if you have any question. Okay, raise up. Do you have any question for about Qwik? About yeah.
So Qwik apparently synthesizes the JSON for the state and any magical stuff. As the app grows, the JSON will grow. When, if, will that JSON affect the performance of the loading?
Could I speak here? Could I speak there? How does this work?
Only one mic.
Both.
It's an
So that's a very good question. So there's a lot of things we didn't talk about. The demo we have for Hacker News is actually a perfect example of that. Hacker News actually sends huge amounts of data to be rendered into the page, and then Qwik kind of looks at it all and says, yes, but you can't really edit any of this stuff, and therefore I'm going to just throw it away. And so we say we have dynamic code tree shaking, and we also have a data tree shaking, if that makes any sense. So we can throw a lot of it away. So that's one. The second bit is that that data will have to get to your application anyways, right? So if you have a very large application, you're still sending that data. Like it's coming there one way or other. And Qwik is just like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that in the worst possible situation where we have to send all the data, we're still only as bad as the other framework's best possible situation. So you have the advantage. And the other thing we haven't talked about is this idea of containers, which actually fit very well for micro front-end services. And what you get to do is basically you get to take your app and you can break it up into smaller apps, and then each app gets its own JSON. And so you could have progressive loading on the data as well. So there's many different tricks that we can do to kind of help with this particular problem. Anybody else want to add something? This was a quick question, but
Yeah. Cool.
Question, long answer. Good job. So, anyone else? Yeah.
How does Qwik manage to like work with other third parties, like state management or anything like that? Are there any issues with you know, accessing some of the data that Qwik is managing? How does that work?
Let me repeat, okay? Because Giddy told me you cannot hear it in YouTube. So. Don't remember. So how does Qwik play with other, you know, state management libraries and such, and third-party code, right?
So there's two questions in there. Are you asking why we don't use third-party, or if I had a third-party manager, could I use it with us? Which one? Both. We can answer both questions. Okay. So why don't we use third-party managers? So I tried really, really hard to not have to do anything. And I was like, can I just reuse whatever's out there? And what I kept running into was problems in the sense that these frameworks really didn't understand the concept of like, hey, I need to like lazy load something, or this thing isn't present yet, or all that stuff. And so on the end, we just kind of gave up and said, you know what, like we just have to build this as well. And so we ended up with the MobX kind of approach to the problem. And not because we like particularly wanted to do this, but because like we didn't know how else to kind of integrate something, and you can't really build a system without a state management system, right? So this is how we got to where we are. Now, can you use another thing on top of this? A lot of people actually ask, like, can I use Redux on top of?
Oh God, no.
Well, yes, but I prefer to keep that opinion to myself. So if you want to be crazy and put Redux on top of our store, knock yourself out. Like nothing prevents you from doing it. Right? Should you do that? I don't know. Like that's your decision to make, right? But yeah, I don't think it's necessary. And we follow MobX, which is I think super cool. And actually, we don't actually have much of a choice but to follow MobX because we need to create subscriptions, and we need to be able to do it in a way that is lazy loadable. And it turns out that kind of MobX is the only thing that kind of fits that mental model. And so we kind of ended up there not by necessarily any particular choice, but like by necessity. You might want to add something to it, or?
No.
Okay, yeah, we have a challenging situation here with the microphone and all that stuff. Okay. By the way, Michelle, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
What are you working on now?
So I'm currently at Meta, working on a team that maintains Flipper, but currently working on a different project, which is still kind of under NDA. But Benji covered it in great detail. Thanks.
Oh, so you are part of the new startup. Cool.
Here or in the US?
So we want to open it up also for a question about performance, and we can ask about performance after loading time.
On your left.
What?
On the
On
left.
the left, yeah. Wait. He's doing it.
Qwik is all about making the optimizing, yeah, the loading. Probably for Google. But are we paying a price for all of the overhead for the many requests we're requesting the server? Like we're hurting the actual user experience while using the website?
Okay, good question.
Let me.
I can repeat the question too.
Yeah, you repeat the question.
The question basically is, if you have too many requests, is that negatively going to impact performance of your application? And it's a good question. And yeah, if you have a large application, breaking everything down into individual files is craziness, and we really didn't get into it. So there's two parts to it. One is that the super hard part is breaking the application down into pieces. If you decide you have too many pieces and you want to put them back together into a single chunk, that's trivial. You can just concatenate the files and you're done, right? So that's super easy part. What we didn't talk about is what kind of possibilities you could do. And so currently we kind of only have heuristics, but like it doesn't take a lot of imagination to say like, hey, you know what you can actually do is just keep statistics on like how people actually use these symbols. And then based on these statistics, you can do two things. One is you can order your prefetching in the correct order. And two is you can concatenate things so that you get like good size bundles. I don't know, maybe you decide that 30 kilobyte bundle is the amazing perfect size, whatever it is. Then you just tell the optimizer like, you know, just put things together until I have about 30 kilobytes and then start a new chunk, right? And because you can sort them and because you have information about what's actually being used, you're still ahead, right? Part of the problem with existing frameworks is that because you get a single chunk, you can't really say like, oh, this button's more important than this other button. They all kind of become working at the same time, right? Whereas when you break everything into pieces, you can say like, this is actually more important, so I want to make sure that these symbols show up first, and then the stuff that is not so important comes on the bottom. And so you get lots and lots and lots of choices. So yeah, it's a valid concern, but actually in practice, you have lots of options to mitigate this thing. And these are options that you just don't have with existing systems because the existing systems can't give you entry points, right? It's all about the entry points. You need to have as many entry points into your application as possible. Typical system gives you one, which is your main method. That's not good enough. You need to have a lot more. And so the magical bit of Qwik is that we basically generate an entry system for every single click listener, for every single component, for every single use effect method, for every single watch method. And you as a developer, for you it's actually trivial to make more entry points because there's just a $sign that we have. So you can just import $sign and write a piece of code, wrap a piece of code inside of it, and then it becomes lazy loadable. So you basically, we made lazy loading so trivial that you don't even have to think about it, and we can break it all up. And then we give you tools to kind of optimize the ordering, concatenation, and all these other things. So it basically is not a problem at all. That was probably a longer answer than you were looking for.
No, that's good. Good for hours, this guy.
Look who's talking!
What? Just the presenter. Okay, more questions. Yeah.
What about a React 18 and server component system? Isn't that solving the zero JavaScript or minimum JavaScript? We don't want to go to with another framework.
Repeat the question.
So the question was, what about React and React server components? It's a complicated answer. and I'm just thinking how to be politically correct here.
Don't be. There's no offer mat on your room.
I think React server components is the best that the React mental model allows you to do. So I think within the mental model that they have, right? Remember how I said like React or other frameworks can never do what Qwik does because doing so would completely break the mental model and become incompatible, right? I think React server components is basically the best you can possibly do and not break the component model, right? But I don't think it's good enough because it actually complicates things quite a bit. You have server components and you have client components. And there's all these rules like a server component can import a client component, but not the other way around. Client component is not allowed to import the server component. Server component can fetch data, but it's not allowed to have listeners or state. Client components can have state and listeners, and so now they have to talk to each other somehow. There's all these restrictions and complications that go to the user. And so I personally, of course I'm biased, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think the Qwik mental model is a lot better because it's the same component that exists both on a server and on a client, and it can start its execution on a server, fetch all the data that's required, and transition to the client. Now, we all talk about no JavaScript. We all are lying a little bit because you can't have a page that's interactive with zero JavaScript, right? We have the Qwik loader, that's 1 kilobyte. But we say it's so tiny that, come on, you can tell us that it's close enough to zero and we inline it. It's a lie, but it's kind of close over there, right? When React server components say that there's zero JS, what they really mean is there is zero additional JS for the component. But in order to make the whole system work, you have to download React, you have to rehydrate all the client components, and then you have to connect to the server and download the server components and reconcile it, right? So it's still quite a lot of work. So I just think that the Qwik mental model is just much nicer mental model where like, I just have components. I don't have to think about like, is it a server component or a client component? Can it have state? Can it not have state? Can it have a listener? Can it not have a listener? And it just naturally does the right thing and it naturally starts its execution on a server, moves to the client, and then keeps running.
Thank you very much. Okay. A question. I have a question. I want to, you are smart people as well. So, what do you think things are going, especially like, there's all this talk about the edge, right? The edge, right? It's like a new term, we need to learn. And the edge doesn't have Node, for example. It just runs JavaScript and stuff like that. So, what do you think about that? Like, do we need, and this is a question mainly for Benji and the others can answer after him, because you are primarily, Node and such, right? So where do you see like, the future ahead in terms of Node and the server and the edge and all those parts?
So, is it off? Oh, no, I have my own.
Oh, you have your own?
Yeah, I cheat.
Well then.
So I'm actually part of like a working group called Winter CG. That's a bunch of like edge computing companies together. I don't actually represent Microsoft there. I represent myself. And there is a lot of work on workers by a lot of companies like Shopify, Cloudflare, Dino. Those of you who don't know, Dino is like a runtime like Node.js, and they're focusing on running on the edge. I am personally not entirely convinced there is a ton of use yet because like I tried using it a bunch. It's kind of expensive at the moment. Like edge computing is considerably more expensive than a CDN. And the performance gains I personally could get when I tried using it in my own projects wasn't there. But like there's a lot of really smart people working on it right now, which means there is like so if someone came to you with Node.js like 10, 12 years ago, there's a very good chance you would say, nah, like PHP is good enough, we have good servers, Ruby and Rails is nice, we have ASP.NET, like there was a bunch of stuff already. So like we're in this position right now with edge computing. It might catch on, it might not. It's definitely interesting. The reason like those runtimes use stuff that's not Node is because Node takes a while to boot, just because of technical debt. There's no like really good reason for that. That can be fixed, like most other things in Node, if it becomes a problem. I think that's it. You want to say something?
I'm just going to terribly abuse this time to ask a question. Go for it. I think the really cool thing about Qwik is that there's now a shared understanding of data on the server and the client, and also a shared understanding of subscriptions on the server and the client. So my question would be like, when can we change an object on the server, use our knowledge of the subscriptions that like are used in the page to send your data over WebSocket and have the change applied on the other side?
Yeah, that is.
Repeat the question. No.
Wait. Shy, always a comedian. Yeah, that's a good question. We don't have any plans for that, but it would be relatively easy to do. It would be relatively easy to, start up some kind of a socket and then just pass data or kind of notify it. One thing I didn't show in a demo, which shouldn't be surprising to you because you've done MobX, is when you get a hold of the object, it doesn't matter where you are. You could be in the DevTools, right? And you can just change it, and all of a sudden, the right things download, right things update, and it just magically works, which is, to me, it's always mind-blowing. So as long as you have some utility that can set up a socket and talk to the server and send it back, it should work. We don't have that magical bit, but we have something else, which is, it's not implemented, but we're thinking really hard about it, which is this idea that you have your app, and we break it down into containers, and there are rules about how containers can talk to each other, and these rules, without getting too much into it, are done in such a way that we can take a child component, and as long as we serialize the contextual data for it, we can send it to the server and ask the server to serialize it for us. And of course, that's expensive, but the server can CD and cache it, and a subsequent request become essentially free. And so in that way, we can do, for example, like route transitions or something like that. Like this is all still a kind of a pipe dream, but it's one of those things that this mental model just kind of enables out of the box for free.
Thanks. Yeah, that's what I've always been dreaming about with MobX. how to bridge that connection gap between server. So
well, maybe you can implement that for Qwik.
Yeah, they're looking for more work to do. Meta is not going to catch, it's not Okay, any other questions from the audience? Yeah.
I sort of have two questions. One is about Qwik. Have you considered using, instead of JSON for the initial state, to use binary object representation? And also an additional one, more generic one for anyone, is what's your opinion on HTML over the wire and live view and sending HTML where the state is managed on the server?
Okay.
The second one can be for all of them.
Yeah, it's for all of us. And actually, the first one can be for all of us too. So why do we use JSON is kind of the question. The short is because we're lazy, right? It's the simplest thing to do. The other answer is that you want to make sure that your application starts up quickly, right? And JSON.parse is quick, super fast, right? And if you now have a custom proprietary format, you can't just like JSON parse and go. You now have to like download extra parser that knows how to do this, execute it, parse it, and all of that is going to be counted against your first click or first interaction with the application. So that's kind of the reasoning why we don't think it's worth the trouble, etc. There's no particular reason why we can't do it, but like that's kind of the reasoning. The second question was, remind me, is
sending HTML.
Oh, sending HTML of the wire. Yeah, I think that's a super cool idea. However, the problem is who's paying for it, and it becomes you. So the nice thing about frameworks is that you're not paying, you as the company who's made the app, you're not paying for the CPUs, right? The CPUs that are being paid for is the end user who's using the computer, right? You have to do the server, but they're like CDN caches and all kinds of things can help you, but at the end of the day, you're not paying for the application running. The problem with like Hotwire is that like, no, now you're getting billed for it. Like now you are running it and it becomes super expensive. So it is just not something that I personally am interested in exploring because I'm interested in more in these super large scale applications where it just makes zero sense to have any kind of payment, any kind of execution model on keeping the state or anything of that sort on a server.
We already did that with PHP.
No, he's talking about like live updates. Like the user clicks a button, you go to the backend immediately without refreshing, and you pass the note. Michelle, you wanna?
Yeah, still I think like with these kind of problems, it always depends on the context. Like the thing is always the question like what you're optimizing for. So if the data set is really large and the amount of duplication you would see in HTML is really big, then it's going to be really expensive. If you have any heuristics about it, like that it's really small and really doesn't matter much, like whether it's just simple HTML or JSON, which need to be parsed and processed and applied, then it can make sense. So I think generally, like, there's no good answers to those kind of questions.
Right. So in terms of like binary formats, like Misko said, it's very hard to do the parsing quicker than like JSON.parse. It's very well optimized. It uses the same shape mechanism from V8, like hidden classes and stuff. But we can work on like, if you're passionate about it, we can work about like adding something maybe better to browsers in terms. Like, if you build it, they will come. I think it will be very relatively possible and easy to convince browser vendors to add a sort of thing. And then, like, if you want, I can walk you through the spec process, and it's definitely something that can be done. It's going to still be very hard to beat JSON.parse, and it's going to be very hard to settle on the format, but it's possible. As for like live HTML, I'm actually like I work on an app in Microsoft called Excel. You probably heard of it. And Excel is huge. It's like a very, very big, like hundreds of megabytes app. So Excel can't actually go on the client, and there has to be this sort of like partial rendering where sometimes we send HTML, sometimes we send computations. It's also like hyper-reactive. So like there are use cases. If your app is large enough, you can't actually put it on the client. But you have to be like a huge mega corporation that can like do a ton of compute on like its own cloud. If you're a small app, I wouldn't consider it. Like you can get most of the benefits by using something like Qwik that just sends the initial HTML. And the other thing to remember is that this approach punishes users with slow internet. So if like you have a calculator and they do this sort of updates, then if your user like has slow internet, then you're paying the latency every single time. The last thing is that this sort of use case is actually a common one for edge computing, like the thing from Shai's question, where people will like put these sort of like small compute tasks on like the CDN edge. The issue is again that's currently very expensive. So if the cost was solved, then that make it more viable. All right, I think we lost Shai. Oh no, here he is.
Yeah. Always here, lurking in the dark. Okay. Awesome. I think we have a last question. Okay, I don't know where it's along. Okay, yeah. What's up, buddy? No, it's we don't know.
This is this guy. My question is about Qwik. One question about, like, do you provide any kind of best practices how to use the app? And second, how would you recommend to upgrade existing apps? Because it's, you know, you do it by piece, or you can do it like all, or you have to do it all in once.
Thank you very much. Please repeat the question.
Just go pilot.
Yeah, it works pretty
Oh,
well.
I have to repeat the online people, right? Okay. So the question was, how do you migrate basically existing app, and do we have best practices? So we're a small team, and we're trying to be as lazy as possible to do as little work as possible, right? And Qwik has already ballooned to like this ridiculously large thing that we wasn't intending it to be, but like it turns out all of these pieces have to be solved, otherwise the whole thing doesn't have value. So one of the things you noticed is that we are very heavily based on the React style of doing things. This is not a coincidence. This is just like, you know, the world loves React for its DX. Why reinvent something new? Why fight with the world? Like, here it is. You can have it. You know, slight differences, but you can have it. So my answer to you is do whatever React does. So I'm sure they have best practices. I'm not sure if they're good or bad, but like just follow them. The second question was like migration, and thanks for asking because I totally forgot to mention it. We are working on this crazy thing called Qwikify. And what Qwikify does is it takes a React component and turns it into a Qwik component. It's a runtime thing, not a compile time thing. And of course, you don't get any of the benefits within the React component. So React component can't like lazy load and all the magic that Qwik can do, but that means you can use a React component within Qwik application. And so if you wanted to migrate your application over to, if it's a React application, you want to migrate it over to Qwik, you can start at the root and replace the root component over to Qwik, and then slowly kind of migrate down. And as the closer to the leaps you get, more islands you create and more lazy loaded opportunity the system has. So Qwik will lazy load the React component because the Qwik can like notice like what listeners the React component cares about. So it's like, oh, you care about mouse move, or you care about click, or something like that. So then it can lazy load that component, rehydrate basically, but because it's so tiny, like it's a small leaf, it's cheap, and then it can play back the event to get the component to do the operation you want. The hard part over there is that we have to be able to pass essentially the context, but the nice thing is that we get to have material design component library for free, which is kind of cool. Yeah, I think that kind of covers it. Do you want to add anything? You said
it's like migrating to React, but that's from React.
Yeah, in theory, you could build these bridges to any framework. We're just kind of focusing on React because, again, it's so close in terms of the mental model, how you write the components, and so on and so forth.
Okay, and with that, I feel that this is a good point to end it, right? So first of all, thank you very much to all the members of the panel. Lovely guests who went all the way from not Israel, all the way to Israel, okay? So
Herzliya is still Israel. It's not Tel Aviv, but...
So thank you very much. What we'll do now, we had a bug in our registration. You wanted the raffle, right? So we'll open the raffle again. Anyone who wants to win a pair of sunglasses that I have here. There's a cool logo here of Qwik, you know. No, just kidding. We raffle Quokka and web store and such. So first of all, let's thank again our members of the panel. You don't want to be in this part. This is the messy part, okay? This is like, you know, you'll see the craziness. People are fighting over web store. Like there is no VS Code, okay? Okay. And so anyone who wants to sign up, we do it by this link, okay? And we'll, and anyone, I forgot to mention, but anyone who wants a Bonnie sticker, okay, let me know, and I will meet me afterward. Okay, so sign up, and in 1 minute, we'll start the raffle. And after the raffle, we'll go for beers. Woo! Down below, what's the name, Benji, of the place that we went last time?
Shai's apartment in Rishon LeZion. I can give you the address if you want.
Benji, do you want to show your presentation now, or do you want to save it for some other time?
I will save it.
Okay.
Misko will מתפדח.
מתפדח?
Yeah.
You are מתפדח, Misko?
What does that mean?
It means prosperity and love. No, it's like feeling embarrassed. No, it's not. We'll show it in the wedding itself. Save it before our dance. Okay. No, not a lot of people know that about me and Misko, but I actually fed him. And we have a picture of me feeding him in a restaurant.
לאגר הנעיל נראה לי, לא? שי?
What?
לאגר הנעיל, המקום של הבירה.
Lager and ale, this is the... Oh,
I think so.
now we have an AC operation. Benji got reminded of the name that I asked before, okay? Like the promise came back, okay?
That's a very complicated way to say Benji is slow.
Yeah.